These last several questions come from our final chapter about rational expressions and equations. So let's go ahead and look at these. Multiplying. When we multiply, we want to start by factoring. So we're going to factor numerator and denominator if possible. And then we're going to simplify or cancel. So in the numerator, we can factor out an 8k. If we factor out an 8k, we're left with k minus 5 over 8k times 1 over 2k. And we factored, that's all we could factor. Now we're going to simplify 8k, cancels with 8k, and we are left with k minus 5 over 2k. We cannot simplify anymore. This is two terms. We can't cancel out the k's because this one doesn't have a k in it. Coming to the next part, again, we want to factor. B minus 5 doesn't factor, and b plus 8 doesn't factor. The numerator here, we can factor. We'll do two groups of parentheses. To get a b squared, we need a b and a b. We'll need two positives because we're trying to get positive 72. And 72 has a lot of factors, but it looks like we're going to want 9 and 8. Because, just a reminder, 9 times b is 9b, plus 8b does give us the 17b. In the denominator, it's only two terms, but we can factor out a 7, and we're left with b plus 9. We have some canceling that happens. Notice we have since we're multiplying, we can cancel any factor in the numerator with any factor in the denominator if they're the same. So b plus 8 does cancel with b plus 8, and b plus 9 cancels with b plus 9 to leave us with b minus 5 over 7. Now we come to dividing. Similar idea. We're going to factor numerator and denominator, but we remember that division is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. And then lastly, we're going to simplify or cancel, however you want to say that. And so we have 1 over x minus 8. Neither of those can be simplified or factored. Divided by x plus 7. That can't be factored, but this bottom one can, hopefully. It's three terms. We have an x squared, so we need x and x. We have a positive 80, so we know the signs are the same. In this case, we want two negatives. And factors of 80, looks like we'll want a 10 and an 8. So we factored. And now we're going to think dividing is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So we have 1 over x minus 8 times, take the reciprocal of this second part, and we look for any common factors, and an x minus 8 cancels with an x minus 8. We're left with x minus 10 over x plus 7. We can't cancel these because there's nothing that goes into all four, into x, into 10, into x, and into 7. So this is our answer. Next one, we'll factor the top factors to r plus 1 and r plus 8. The denominator factors, we need to have an r and an r. This is a negative, so we need a plus and a minus. Factors of 16, looks like we'll need an 8 and a 2. So we factor that, and I'm going to group these together because this doesn't factor, but dividing is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. Take the reciprocal of that, and these cancel. The r plus 8's cancel. We're left with r plus 1 over 1, which really is just equal to r plus 1. So that's dividing. Rational expressions are kind of unique because you actually start with multiplying and dividing because they're a little easier, and then you get into adding and subtracting. To add or subtract fractions, you need a common denominator. So for 54, we want a common denominator. The least common denominator. Well, actually, let's start. We want to, if possible, we want to factor. Again, we want to find a common denominator. Find and get the least common denominator. And then we add or subtract, whichever it's asking for. So in this one, the least common denominator is, well, this one has a factor of 2. This one has a factor of x minus 3. And so how do we get that? Well, this denominator needs a 2, so we multiply top and bottom by 2. Over here, I'm just going to write over this. Hopefully you can still see it. This one needs the x minus 3. And so now let's multiply here. We got x minus 3 times 2x is going to be 2x squared minus 6x. Just distributing the 2 into here. And that's over x minus 3 times 2. Plus, we have to multiply this 2 in here. So this is 8x minus 6. In the denominator, we again have x minus 3 times 2. They are common denominators, so we can combine. And here we have a negative 6x and an 8x, so we have 2x squared. Combining these gives us plus 2x minus 6 over x minus 3 times 2. In fact, we can go a little bit further here because it looks like we can factor 2 out of this numerator. So x squared plus x minus 3. Let's factor 2 out over x minus 3 times 2. So now that we have factors again, 2 reduces with 2. We cannot reduce here because this isn't a factor, it's all these 3 together, so we can't reduce any more than that. Our answer is x squared plus x minus 3 all over x minus 3. Moving to our next one, we're going to get a least common denominator again. Let's put it over here. The least common denominator is, this one has a 4. So we didn't even have to do any factoring because nothing factors. Times 3v plus 1. This side needs a 3v plus 1. This side needs a 4. So over on the left, we distribute the 5. So this is 15v minus 5 over the common denominator of 3v plus 1 over 4. Over here, we have still minus 5v times 4 is 20v over the common denominator. They are common denominators, so we can combine 15v minus 5 minus 20v. So make sure it's minus, and if there were more than one term over here, the minus would go to both of them. Over the common denominator, 3v plus 1 times 4. We do have some like terms we can combine here, and we get negative 5v minus 5 over 3v plus 1 times 4. Moving on to solving equations. This is going to be similar because we have rational expressions, but we're going to find the least common denominator, but we actually don't need to get a least common denominator. We don't have to have all the same denominators down here. We're just going to multiply both sides by the least common denominator. So actually, again, we want to factor first. So that's first, multiply by the least common denominator, and then last we're just going to solve the remaining equation. Least common denominator here is 5b. So again, we don't have to get a common denominator. we multiply by the common denominator. So multiplying by 5b. Over here, the b and the b cancel, so we're left with 5 times 5, because this is like a 5b over 1, if that helps. The b's cancel, 5 times 5 is 25, equals, this gets distributed to both. When multiplying here, the 5b's cancel and we're left with 1. When we multiply here, nothing cancels, so 1 times 5b is just 5b. Now we want to solve for b, so we would subtract 1 from both sides. Negative 5b on the right equals 24, and divide both sides by negative 5. So b is negative 24/5. It says check for extraneous solutions here. Extraneous solutions would be things that, in this case, make the denominator 0, because we can't divide by 0. 24/5 will not make the denominator 0, so it works. So on to the next one. Speaking of extraneous solutions, if we get to an answer like x equals 4, that would be an extraneous solution because 4 minus 4 is 0, and we can't divide by 0. So here we go. The least common denominator for this one is simply x minus 4. We don't really have to factor anything. So really this is the denominator specifically we want to factor. But again, nothing to factor. So we're going to multiply both sides by x minus 4. So this one looks a little tricky because x minus 4 times this first part, the x minus 4 cancels, and we're left with 3x minus 6. On the right side, we're going to take x minus 4 times this first fraction. Well, x minus 4 cancels again, so we're left with 4x minus 4. And then we have to do x minus 4 times 1. So we have this plus, well, x minus 4 times 1 is just x minus 4. And now we're going to solve this related equation, which again turns out to be pretty easy. 3x minus 6 equals, we got a couple like terms here. 5x, negative 4, and negative 4 is negative 8. We'll subtract 5x from both sides. At the same time, we'll add 6 to both sides. And we get negative 2x equals negative 2. Dividing both sides by negative 2, we get x equals 1. Again, 1 is okay because it does not make the denominator 0. X equals 1. And finally, our last one, we're going to multiply, this is like the last one, multiply by the least common denominator, which in this case is just 5x. This gets distributed to both terms. When multiplying by this first term, the 5x cancels, so we're left with x minus 5. Multiplying by the second term, 5x times 1 is 5x. Over on the right side, 5x times this thing, the 5x cancels, and we're left with x minus 1. Combine like terms, x plus 5x is 6x. Let's subtract x from both sides and add 5 to both sides. This is 5x equals 4. Divide both sides by 5 and you get 4/5. Does this make the denominator equal 0? Nope. So that's our answer.